to Tomorrow's People, the podcast brought to you by Personio and me, Perry Timms. Everything starts with people. And someone who has an interesting view on inclusion where people are concerned is Atif Choudhury. In this episode, I have the pleasure and the honour of exploring things like anticipatory welcome for people who have very different perspectives on the world and very different needs from the future and what Tomorrow's People is all about. Atif Choudhury, welcome to Tomorrow's People, the podcast.
Thank you, Ferry.
Great to be here and with you because my introduction to you was in a very different forum. You were on stage and you were talking about the work that you did with Zaytoon at Meaning Conference in Brighton. And we've been in touch ever since. And your work fascinates me around diversity and ability, which is also the name of your company. So I'm interested in the whole concept of work and what you're working on now. So what's occupying you?
Great. I think nothing's changed in some ways, but I think the tools or the conversations sort of accelerate in different pockets.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work that I'm doing at the moment, which is, Zaytoon is what you knew. It's a fair trade olive oil company in Palestine. Yeah. And it's well known. Yeah. And it's where I found my voice, really. But the other side of it is DNA. And what we do is to build inclusion across the world. Yeah. But a big part of that is how we digitize that. Okay. You know, and how we can get, which is a concept that might be new to some of your podcast viewers, or maybe not, but inclusion passports. So we're launching a big passport called Access, which is designed for people to be able to participate in choices. Yeah. A big thing is talking to folks like Heathrow and Boeing. Okay. And to recognise, look, how many people with hidden differences? Right. Or unhidden ones, but have to tell a story maybe 5 or 6 times before you even got on a plane. Right. How tiring is that? Wow, yeah. What mental fatigue does it cause? Yeah. So the idea is, how do we change that? And we can do that through technology. Okay. By me saying, I'm coming. Yeah. And just pinging a passport to somebody to say, these are my needs. These are the ones I'm willing to talk about. And it's okay. Wow. And then when I feel more confident or behaviour change says, inclusion passports. We do that here. It's not just about having lanyards or pictures, but we expect differences and we welcome them.
I think that phrase, expect differences, really resonates with me because it often feels like you get that unexpected reaction when somebody has the courage to declare, I need something different, that you then suddenly perhaps check yourself in and go, how have I overlooked that? How have I not provided that? But there is this knowing thing, isn't it? That's almost like the first part of appreciating how to adjust, adapt and make things feel inclusive from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. But the challenge is we've got a number of issues at stake, right? You've got performative behaviour patterns where we feel like, we're terrible if we don't know. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And we've failed. And then you've got the idea that we've inherited imbalances. Yeah. These imbalances are just not fair. Yeah. They've created not just an imbalance in someone's life, but they prevented us from seeing what our civil society is. Yeah. So the challenge then becomes what's our intent? Right. You know? And I think your intent will come through when you've got curiosity, of course. But the humility to say, actually, I haven't got this right. Yeah. I'm not a good or bad person. I'm not a terrible leader. Yeah. I want to know how to welcome this better. Yeah. But I don't know. Yeah. So how can I look to do that? Right. And for me, I talk about it in terms of the anticipatory welcome. Okay. I anticipate I don't know. Yeah. I welcome that I don't know. Yeah. As a leader of organisations that have changed things. Yeah. But I'm also excited to know that difference. Yeah. If it's sharing something, it's doing something that's quite constructive. It's informing a process. It's sharing what we need to do to get it right. Yeah. If it's disclosing something, they're not the same thing. And I sort of wonder if that's worth exploring, or for people to think about. But often people would disclose something because of job insecurity, performance management, KPIs, whatever. So then you go into job protection mode. Right. You're in flight or fight. Yep. When you start looking at job protection, you're also dealing with, whether you know it or not, mental health loss. Right. So nobody has really disclosed something that hasn't also done a lot of emotional labor and put themselves in a place of pain.
Yeah.
And whether that's received well or not, well, that's what we don't know.
Yeah.
Sharing says something different. Sharing says, I'm excited to tell you something.
Yeah.
I know it's going to inform your process. I know you're going to welcome it. And this looks like a culture of sharing here.
And that anticipatory welcome feels like it invites the sharing with less of a stigma and challenge and anxiety than a disclosure would be. But we've got so used to that word disclosure.
We have, yeah.
We've almost tried to make that quite noble. But as you say, there's a lot of mental labour in that.
Yeah, yeah. And I often illustrate this through 3 different triangles, but I won't do that now because we don't have them. But, but essentially, if you can imagine there's a triangle out there that just says, we don't care.
Yeah.
We're not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's not worth you telling us.
Yeah.
If you tell us, we'll judge you on competency and such and such.
Yeah.
Now, that's a ginormous triangle. No one admits to being in it. But culturally, organizations around the world and governments and processes are in that.
Yeah.
You've got another one that says reasonable adjustments at the bottom.
Yep.
We'll do reasonable adjustments. You tell us what we need, we'll do that. That's where a lot of folks are at. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
In fact, it's a lot better than the other one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And so it's the folks going, okay, tell us what you need and we're going to work accordingly. But the challenge is really important to understand is not everyone knows how to tell you what they need.
Yeah.
Not everyone has a psychological safety to even begin to do it.
Yeah.
And not everyone is sure what the repercussions are.
Yeah.
Now, if they're great, then brilliant. It's a lottery win.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be.
No.
So there is another triangle. This is the one that diversity and ability focuses on and teaches, and what a key part of the anticipatory welcome, which really just puts reasonable adjustment right at the top of the triangle.
Okay.
Because the first thing is about culture of informed practice.
Okay.
It says things. It says, we are looking to get this right.
Okay.
We understand that we can't be psychic, but we are looking to be excited about differences and the richness that brings us.
Right.
DNA is an organisation where 86% of the team will be self-defined as disabled.
Right.
This is a huge number of people in terms of percentage.
Yeah.
What excites me more than that is a reality check that says we couldn't do this work well without those lived experiences. We couldn't do it well. Yeah. It excites me that so many of them are the first of their family. So many of my team are the first of their family to go to university. Right. It excites me that we're global majority-led. It excites me that we're women-led. Yeah. But it's the class aspect that says, I come from a social capital or a class that says, I should be ashamed of these differences. Okay. Or I come from a culture that says, we don't talk about these differences. So when an organisation says, we get that. Yeah. In fact, we anticipate it. Yeah. We recognise that psychological safety isn't just a word. Yeah. That it's actually an action. Yeah. But it's principled by the ability to actually do it. Yeah. And that includes HR directors. Sure. And that includes presidents of everybody. Psychological safety means everyone. Yeah. But it's recognising that if a culture of informed practice is the first thing you do, if after that you have universal design thinking, then you can say reasonable adjustment should be at the top. Because this person's cerebral palsy affects them differently to this person. Yep. This person's dyslexia may affect them differently. This person's and such. Yep. But those are right at the top. Yeah. Rather than the first thing you've got to do is let us emotionally dissect your needs and we may hopefully react well. Wow.
The way you describe that feels like there is either a mild or a very pronounced trauma involved in some of those exchanges.
Deeply. Deeply. I mean, look, I speak from my own experiences, but I will say that these differences, they live at the heart of our brilliance. It was talent and trauma lives in the heart of the same person at the same time. Yeah. Now, the world, we are really comfortable in this world of talking about that when people are famous. Yeah. In fact, we're excited about it. We even use the word disruptor, right?
Yeah, sure.
Say we love a disruptor. And in truth, we don't. No. What we love is a story. Yeah. The challenge becomes is, look, if we want that innovation and we want that difference, we're going to have to say we're prepared to want it, even if it's inconvenient. Yeah. At times, we're going to have to want it, even if sometimes it's uncomfortable and it's not famous. but look what it's showing us. You know?
And just the whole language shift is pretty symbolic, isn't it? About an anticipatory welcome and being excited about the opportunities to learn, understand, and do, as you say. And psychological safety is so easy for people to say, and yet it is a real state of being, isn't it? You've got to be psychologically safe, and the environment has to enable you to be fully what you need to be in that environment.
Yeah. And I think the challenge for leadership is that I think it's the challenge for these discussions in general. It's the kind of buzzwords and the HR speak that does get LinkedIn excited.
Yeah.
And we get excited because LinkedIn, I guess, essentially moves our traffic.
It does.
But what's our intent?
Yeah.
Our intent is to say, I think, what kind of world do I want my children to go to work in?
Yeah.
What kind of world do I wish I went to work in as a youngster? What kind of leader would I have liked being around when I was a kid? So when you start looking at these things, you start recognizing, how do you move beyond sound bites and words? You start visioning something that I think is a lot more than a job title. It's more than it's your own personal values. You know, it's largely, I suppose, a civic responsibility. But I think it's much more interesting than that. It's about, what world do you want for yourself?
And the world of work feels like it's becoming more attuned, even if not yet totally comfortable, with being a bit more standout even than the rest of society. As in, I'm going to create almost like a safe vacuum because I know it's right for the people who come to join me. Even if the world actually is more turbulent than that, I'm going to create sanctuary.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, great. It's fantastic. I mean, like, I'm a CEO of an organization that has pronounced talent and differences. It is my job to create a sanctuary of a kind, if I may say. But I can't guarantee that.
No.
Right? And I think even if I say you're in a safe place.
Oh, yeah.
To who?
Oh, exactly.
You know, to who? And so this might go back to humility, right?
Yeah.
To say, what is it to be you? What brings out? I personally, and I've shared that with folks in the past and yourself, that I'm not a big fan of the bring your whole self to work. Because I think what is generally a beautiful invitation, and I generally mean that. What is a beautiful invitation, but it can be an imposition to somebody else. So it's more a case of saying, what brings out the best in you? What brings out something that makes you excited about it? What makes you feel safe? Tell me, rather than me telling you you're safe.
Great point, because the declaration of it doesn't mean it's real, does it? Except perhaps to you declaring it, you feel comfortable by declaring it.
And look, it's sort of famously said, and I say it sometimes, look, that we move at the speed of trust.
Nice, friend.
You know? And sometimes it takes just 6 seconds, right? Because somebody who looks like you is saying something when people who look like you don't say those things. Do you know? And that can take just 6 seconds, right? Or somebody just making you feel you belong there, but on your terms, not on theirs. And then sometimes, actually, the speed moves at 60 years. Because it never happened. You spent your whole life waiting for somebody to go, actually, you are different. But look what it gave us.
I really like the word difference, because I sort of look back on my own life and kind of think, I've been different from a working class background and didn't go to university, all those kind of things. But I've also got to accept that I'm still privileged in all sorts of ways, right? And I'm so comfortable with that, and so comfortable to kind of challenge myself by going, don't forget though, because I do tend to sometimes have some assumptions or affiliations, and I'm thinking, but that's still all about my terms there, right?
Yeah, maybe, but that's human as well.
Yeah. But I love the fact that we are getting more, perhaps, savvy and comfortable with that discomfort, and being able to say, look, I want to understand, because my perception of the world is absolutely mine, and I cannot empathise and show compassion in the way that I think is meaningful to not just me in my definition of it, but you. And the bring the best out of yourself thing is lovely, because it's almost like that's at the heart of my intent. I want to really, really show that, and I can only really do that if I listen and understand and appreciate, and there's almost something symphonic in that exchange I'm sensing, because you suddenly can have lots of aha moments yourself, still about yourself, right? But I suppose what I'm thinking is, for that other person, it's like, finally, somebody who isn't like me and doesn't have the same challenges I have wants to know how we create harmony and do the best.
Yeah. Well, that's that enthusiasm, isn't it? That curiosity.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that ultimately, look, the best we can all do is use a map to navigate the world.
Right.
But each of us will have our own maps. And some of that map will be, in fact, I would argue most of that map is created in childhood.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And so it matters. Class matters here. You know? It's not a protected characteristic. No. It should be. In fact, all of the 9 protected characteristics should be understood through a lens of class.
Yeah.
Because nothing is more disabling than poverty.
Wow.
You know? So when you start then looking at who has agency and who doesn't, well, that experience will be not just in your status quo. But it will be in your own sense of identity. You know, your own self-esteem. You may have privilege, but if you don't feel it, or you can't recognize it in yourself, or you may have the most greatest ideas in the world. You may be the guy that, you know, that changes so much in the world. But we have examples of that. Alan Turing, a guy, you know, the man took his own life. He changed the course of World War II. We owe a gift to Alan Turing's difference. He named a machine after the first person he loved, Christopher. So we are in debt to neurodiversity. We are in debt to differences. But we often play catch up when they become famous. When it's all around us.
It's a powerfully evocative phrase to say that we're in debt to things like that. Like,
I think we are.
But I love it because it does feel like a sense of beholdenness to it that we perhaps don't compute in the way that until you use those words. That's a very strong emotional reaction that you can create with that. And I suppose when we think about the practicalities of work and people, you know, having agendas and, like you said before, KPIs and all sorts of other things, it's easy to get caught up in all that and say that's what matters. And then you sometimes have those moments where you're like, hang on a minute. But it's the people that matter and their difference that actually contributes to that in a way that I'm not privy to and understanding as much of. And I know what will happen in some scenarios because I've seen it. People kind of double down on certain things and go, we're going to go big on this. And I remember a big technology company saying, we're deliberately going to start to recruit more people with autism because what we've recognised is they make brilliant coders. And I had a reaction to that, which is almost like, I kind of love it and loathe it. I didn't know where to sit on it because I could see the intent potentially, but I could also see manipulation and all those kind of things. And I'm sort of thinking, I can't be the only one that struggles with that concept in that way.
No, I think you're not the only one. And I think there's such importance in what you just said. I mean, I can add to it and to explore it for readers. But look, I mean, Audre Lorde rightly said it, but I will try and break that down even further, where she said, and it's incredible, I mean, if you haven't looked at Audre Lorde's work, or I recommend it, but she said there's no such thing as a single issue struggle. Nice. Because we don't live single issue lives. Now, if someone says to me, we love autistics here, I'm like, why? And said, we love, and then because if you're selling me a 90s version of autism, that is, you know, white single men, essentially not great at conversation, not relationship builders, but good at coding or good at IT or good at, then I said, you can tell me what that, you can call that what you want, but that's not autism. You know, and the story you're saying to women and the story you're saying to people of colour is you don't belong here, not in our autism program. You know? Now, in truth, we have something far more interesting here at stake, which is really the genome, the human mind itself, you know, that it survived through famine, through wars, through continental changes, drifts. We have, of course, our populations are at different things. Of course, we've understood the world differently, and of course, we've survived, and some of us sadly haven't. In that space, we've only welcomed a certain group of people until we discovered we lost something. Do you know? I mean, I can take it really far back, but really what I'm saying is, at the time of hunter-gatherers, let's maybe not so, the ADHD brain was exactly the brain that would have made sense. Why? Because we're in flight or fight. We're being hunted. We've got less food. the weather can change, we may die.
Yeah.
So you're thinking about 15, 16 things all at once, right? Constantly at once. You're not great at sitting on one thing, but you know what? Nobody needs you to. They want you to figure out, navigate flight or fight is kicking in. Then we changed years until, and actually very recently, I would say, to a farmer time, where we weren't even being hunted. In fact, we didn't even have to keep moving.
No.
Right? Now, that's really recently. And then you can have the folks who can really focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And they thrive really right now. Yeah. While the other people are on 15, 16 things.
Yeah.
Yes, they're great innovators. Yeah. Yes, they're incredible as entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Yes, the world is talking about that more and more now, as if it's a new thing.
Yeah.
But they are also kids who struggle at school.
Yeah.
They are girls who have internalized that.
Yeah.
They are filling prisons in this country in terms of neurodiversity not understood. Yeah. And so I guess I'll bring this to a moment is that if we understand neurodiversity only through, or dyslexia, probably from my experience, dyslexia and ADHD, you only understand it through white, middle-class people who can talk about it and identify with it and even feel safe in it because they found out as children. Then that's a wonderful thing because they feel safe in it and they found out as children. But then we have the good dyslexic who's an entrepreneur and is selling airplanes or things. And then maybe I'll use myself as an example. My childhood and Richard Branson's are very different. He's a good fellow, I'm sure. But if I think about dyslexia, my dyslexia and his dyslexia, even if we scored exactly the same on a dyslexia RIT scoring, the only thing we have in common is a beard. Yeah. You know? Because we're very because its experience was very different to us. Yeah. It's how we felt about it. And I'm sure, and I know that he felt a lot of pain in it. Yeah. But an entire sense of helplessness that you may not be able to look after your family probably wasn't on the table for him. But it was for me. And so I guess really what we're saying is that we've got to move away from the optics of who's got what diagnosis. Into what is the impact of isolation in your life? What does that rob us of? Not just you. But like I said, talent and trauma lives in the heart of the same person at the same time.
That's such a strongly binding thought to have and talks to the complexities of humans that are, I guess fascinates us. But it also makes me go to the almost drive that we have to categorize everything and define it and put a ring round it. Do you know what I mean? And I guess you could say our developed intellect has shown us that's a good way to do things. Like, again, for who?
Yeah, but we miss so much when we do that. Because it isn't just about, categorization is helpful because it tells us something about what we're dealing with. Yeah. And look, we're tribal people because of familiarity. What looks not familiar can be attacked, and it often is, and such and such. So we do that. The world is governed through that space, familiarity. But it doesn't often stop to ask, what are we fundamentally missing? Yeah, because if we say, right is might, or the strength of what feels familiar must be right, and anything different to that isn't, well, then we're going to catch up every day. Where would we be in this world without the experiences of women being able to show what the world looks like? Well, in truth, we don't know, right? We're on LinkedIn. We talk about menopause as if women only started having a menopause 2 years ago.
Literally, I know.
And that's a sense of comedy, but of where we're at because we don't define the importance of something. Yeah. But it also says where we're always just missing stuff. Yeah. I probably think about right now is something truly, what I've noticed, I suppose, is the conversations that I like having with leadership. There are social sensibilities to it. Yeah. There are. And if you're not indigenously English or you navigate that, you even code switch. I suspect I do that a lot or had to do that a lot. And there's a sincerity which I ask for. I don't ask for agreement. I ask for sincerity. Nice. I ask that of myself. So I ask it of you. I ask it of everyone. Yeah. But I know that's very difficult because you are navigating different class structures. You're navigating social acceptance. But what is fundamentally important is that we are leaders that can have serious conversations because people are dependent on it.
Yeah.
We've all been through something quite challenging, you know. We've never been anywhere like this since World War II. In the context of the lockdown, in terms of COVID, in terms of what happened. World War II was the last time we were all connected to something globally. So then the challenge is, and I worry about this, that in all the loss of lives, all the shielding that disabled people had to do, even more so, all the incredible mutual aid organisations that were created by volunteers, including those who volunteer for the NHS. It was over 8,000.
Yeah.
All those lessons are lost, are not learned.
Yeah.
And the urgency and the humility that leadership had during that year and a half or over those 3 years to say, we're really scared for our team about mental health loss. We really want a real conversation. I'm nervous that we don't keep that momentum going.
Yeah, me too.
That we build this thing that I think is coming from Silicon Valley and areas. And so, you know, the famous chap that sells lots of cars gets us all, and Yahoo as well, gets us all back into office as if the office is the only credible place to be a meaningful worker.
Exactly that. And there's a couple of lovely words there that I will play on, but I wanted to pick up on that isolation point because it seems so pronounced and paramount in the forefront of people's minds that we're seeing the absolute opposite of that in the way you just described it. It's almost like we're making isolation a demonized thing and a choice you're making to the point that if you don't, off you go type thing. It's like, whoa, when did that flip so quickly from we are concerned by isolation because you're just in your own house? You know, it's a bizarre twist.
But what's also odd as well, and again, this is the richness of what did we learn?
Yeah.
And what do we love that we learned as well? Well, I love that we learned that we can tackle the disability employment gap. You know, I'd absolutely love that. Before the pandemic, and it's 36%. That totally means the disparity in employment and disability. 36, essentially, that means that we won't change that in this lifetime. But something comes along in 2019, and I know, of course, it was horrific. But if I'd have said in 2012, well, look, we need to get people challenge this gap. Of course, directors say, it's a good idea, and we believe in principle. We love disability pride month, but we can't do this because people can't work at home. We can't have technologies in people's houses because, you know, security. We can't. And then suddenly, we just found we can. And so the question then becomes let's not lose that.
Exactly. I'm with you on that one. And there were lots of things I loved about it as well. And I'm loathing some of the debates that seem to be just absolutely driven by wealth and power and esteem and control. And that brings me back to sincerity, because that seemed to make an enormous amount of difference during that period where leaders would show up with more sincerity, like, I don't know what we're doing, we're all in this together type thing. And that really seemed to bring people to a point of togetherness and appreciation, invited into homes virtually, admittedly, but that became a novel thing. But that sincerity to me is absolutely what we're trying to get at the heart of. How can we make the working proposition in this world a more sincere one?
And I think that's going to ask us to do something sincerely, ironically, which is to dig deeper than we do. I don't know. I mean, I think we're in class bubbles, right? I mean, a lot of do folks who are not on LinkedIn, do they get to be part of the zeitgeist and the conversation? Totally. Do blue collar workers go, you know, I get it, it's all about belonging, but that's not a conversation we have here. And then, do we spend the next 6 months or 6 years discussing it, but actually not define it? Do you know? And so we find that we are talking about the workplace, but I think we have got to understand we're talking about many different overlapping workplace identities, which are attached to class. They really are. Even when I hear conversations about culture, I go, tell me what you mean. You know, well, we mean people feel good. Okay, that's good. That's a start. What else? And then you start looking at the idea of differences and how they show up. And you think people are they're nobody's trying to mess this up. I think they're just a bit lost. And a little bit afraid to show that vulnerability to say, I just don't really know. Actually, can we get this to a space where mental health, which we've done, we're doing. If you could imagine 15 years ago, would people listening to this say, you know, folks like Steve Fry talked about mental health, Frank Bruno did, do you remember in the UK? In those days, it was about whether you're bipolar or not, or if you've been institutionalized or not. Now, it's a discussion we all belong to. And I think the work is then saying, well, if we could make it that seamless, then we can do that on so many different differences. I don't think people buy battery eggs anymore. Like, I think we know enough to say, let's not do that. Yeah. It's these little nudges. When it comes to participation, justice, differences, we can say, look, talent will show up. We're not finding it easy to get it, but it might come up with, it might show up differently to what it used to look like in the 90s,
And you just hit on a really interesting word that I came across several years ago from the work of Wilson Wong at the CIPD, and it was about organisational justice. I'd not even heard those two words put together, and it was a really powerful and quite evocative piece about, actually, we're talking about, at the time, it was largely still diversity-led as an agenda, and he seemed to just blow it up and elevate it right to organisational justice, and I attached to it instantly. I'm like, oh, that feels like the ultimate way to head for something that's got real nobility, a sense of absoluteness about it. And I know that's perhaps even a little bit flippant to even sort of title it as that, because absoluteness is obviously fleeting and difficult to define.
But it's an aspiration, isn't it?
But I love the concept that we start from a point of, is this just and fair?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is I work in fair trade, and I used to jokingly say, as my son, when he was 4, I said, does that mean everything else is unfair trade? And I said, well, we're then discussing the ideas and the minutiae of capitalism, essentially, because there's no transparency chain, there's no beneficiary. Yeah. So we then have to look at what is, and I think we do have to talk about this in context of justice. And as I said, I don't think you can remove that, because then you're speaking to job titles and not values. Yeah. And this podcast is about tomorrow's people. Yeah. What tomorrow is about social justice. It is about inclusion. Yeah. I jokingly once said, look, diversity is about counting people. Yep. But inclusion is about insisting people count. Nice. Yeah, they're not the same thing. You can say we've got lots of women here, but you don't say which women. I know. You say nothing of the story of women. Yeah. You can say that we've got disabled people here, but if that's optics and PR, then don't say it at all. Yeah. But most of all, what is it about impact? You're telling me about labels. Yep. Perhaps you're telling me about a wheelchair user. Yep. But that's just a tool the person uses to move. It doesn't tell me anything about the impact. So what is it you do? I'm an Asian guy. I have more in common growing up where I did, in South London, in a place called Thamesmead. Some people might know it. It's a ginormous council estate. But of course, my neighbours were working class white folks who, essentially good folks, but not much money. Yep. I have probably more in common with English white working class folks than I probably do with, Asian people sending other Asian people to Rwanda. And I mean that in the sense that I know that's a bit topical, but I look at it and I think, how have we got here? Do you know? Yeah. And so I suppose I'm really saying is that it will always boil down to values, It will boil down to understanding that there are people deeply marginalised. Yeah. And your curiosity and your humility, not your defensive postures. Yeah. Not your reaction to that, but your depth of willing to understand will change things.
Hey folks, Perry Timms here, host of Tomorrow's People. I have to tell you that I'm loving Personio. It's a game changer for HR. With fantastic features and new updates coming all of the time, it keeps your HR work innovative almost on its own. Check them out at personio.com. That's PERSONIO.com. Again loops back to the anticipatory welcome type of thing, that if you want to start to open a debate about justice rather than belonging and equity inclusion, which we're starting to become very familiar with, and we do see both tokenistic and very sincere and humbling instances of that does feel like a huge leap to take, doesn't it, to go straight to justice. But if you're anticipatory welcoming to that allows the voice and the space and the exploration, and it feels to me like that would give people a sense of how they could come together to pursue that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that combined power seems to be what's missing in top-down trickle-through thinking in organisations. Like, we, the committee, have decided, here's our implementation plan. And people kind of going, well, where's my input in that? What am I going to do about that? There's this invitation missing part. I don't understand quite why, but it does feel like that. And just down to the whole concept of how people in organisations are trying to create some spaces. The whole concept of employee representative groups comes to mind.
Yeah,
because I've been around a long time and I've seen staff networks and all sorts of other versions of that. Where do you sit on the ERGs, and what perhaps is the Atif almost like dream for what ERGs could become or mean or do, or whether
that's
they should
great.
be?
Well, that's a fantastic question.
Okay.
I love that question.
Okay.
I'll try and be succinct because it deserves a clear answer.
Wherever you want to go.
But look, I mean, if we don't have an intersectional understanding right, of the barriers that people face, then we don't have a relevant understanding of the barrier. So what we have is the optics. Yeah. So if your ERG is on neurodiversity, but you don't have brown people there.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a question.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't have women there, there's a question there. Yeah. So then the question is really about, okay, it goes back to that anticipatory welcome.
Yeah.
And if you have an agenda to say, oh, we're neurodivergents here only, and neurotypicals are there.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, what is it you're saying about the person who's afraid to get a diagnosis?
Oh, yeah.
What are you saying about the person whose culture says, no, that can affect your marriage? Or we don't do that here. So the question then becomes an act of solidarity and justice to say, we as an ERG want to get this right.
Yeah.
We also, just as many of our leaders here have inherited acceptable optics.
Yeah.
But in truth, we can do better. We can understand that the global majority, which is what I'm writing on, and working on, the global majority's voice on neurodiversity is deeply absent.
Okay.
And yes, there's an invitation to say, come and tell you about your differences. But it's still in a Eurocentric framework. It says, this is how we've codified the model. This is how the model works. And we want to measure you on this new model. But you've defined this for Eurocentrism. You haven't asked the global majority world. You haven't asked what autism would look like in Africa before the arrival of colonization. You wouldn't have asked that of Indians.
No.
Courageously, I'll say this now. I mean, not a single border of Africa or the Middle East or India was made by Indians or people from the Middle East or Africans. So if they don't have control of what borders there are, what control would they have had of what is a meaningful education?
Right.
Or what is differences in education? I know that's a big one, but I'm just saying is to be as European as possible is to be as human as possible. Now we've entered a new world is coming, calling us, and technology is changing that. People's attitudes are changing that. The concept of decolonization is changing. It's in academia, but of course it's going to reach the workplace big time if it hasn't. You know, it's not started in the workplace enough, but it will come. And it's asking questions, how much of this makes us really international citizens when we communicate to each other, when we support each other, when we connect to trade or to justice or just to participate.
Interesting concept about those boundaries and borders that you talked about there, and the construct of things that people perhaps don't know the backstory to, just play into it and go along with it because they just sense what's around them. So again, it talks to the curiosity, doesn't it, about, well, where did this start from, and like by whom, and like what should it be though, and invite perhaps a little bit of deconstruct, reconstruct thinking.
So I mean, but you know, we are in a brave new world, right? I mean, you know, of course, it's going to be talked about a lot as the years go on, the power of AI and what it does, and the prompt mechanics. What has the power to prompt an AI to do a certain thing? What's out there versus, again, a majority of voices who don't actually prompt things and say things. So we're going to see what is a precipice, I think, a crossroads that says, look, can we really do things that move things faster? But they allow us to be more egalitarian in our approach to work and life and workplace harmony. Or do we just reinforce, a bit like the Industrial Revolution, not just a chance to accumulate wealth, but a chance to accumulate wealth for just for a few people. And others will just suffer what they must. These are big questions, and I know that they can be a bit too epic, but I think it's having people courageously sort of asking these questions to say, let's not be in denial of what these can do, because they can change. technology can change
Yeah.
lives incredibly. Assistive technology, which is what Diversity in Breed does, changes lives every day.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do we keep a human-centered solution here to address what is a human-centered need, not a market-driven one only?
And your introduction to us of access and the inclusivity passport reminds me of the power that technology can be leveraged when it is about solving problems and helping people be their best and so on. So there's something about the nobility in that. But I loved the sense of solidarity that we perhaps can say, I'm an individual, I have difference, but the solidarity means I'm together with others no matter what the difference. Yeah,
absolutely.
There's something about how are we connecting? We're connecting to something noble, great. I can really feel that. And my difference actually helps us with that, accelerates that, expands that. There's a sense of abundance almost in there.
It absolutely, it drives a conversation in a positive. I mean, this is why I think that the balance is, and it goes back to the ERG things, I think they're a force for good. Right? Yes, but it's understanding some people are invited to the party and some people aren't. This tells us something about who's not at the table, perhaps tells us more about, perhaps tells us more than who's at the table, right, to an extent. But it's also saying, well, yeah, but they are working in kindness. They are trying to do something. We can't just flick our fingers and everybody's arrived. But what we can do is say, we really want to get this right, folks. We are trying. And I suppose the challenge then becomes is to say, is there a space of maturity? What does, it's a bit like, again, it's a brilliant name for the podcast, Tomorrow's People, right? What does the maturity of the conversation look like? Because we've only recently just said diversity means women.
Exactly.
And now we're trying to say, actually, it means that we will have women who care about being paid equally, that care about climate change, that may be wheelchair users, that are also fostering leadership rather than it's about women.
Absolutely true to all of that. And I think I was drawn to the whole sense of it being epic and how much you've got me thinking about this as a really strong way of being very philosophical about things, which allows you to do the curiosity, the dialogic, the exchange, the appreciation, the understanding, without it being so overly defined and categorized that it becomes sanitized and, almost throwaway in some respects, dare I say it. And how we need to then make that switch into what you describe really nicely, action, things, deeds, products, services, gestures, all sorts of things that we might have said in the Industrial Revolution is how we standardize everything. That's that almost, you just got me really imaginatively thinking. The Industrial Revolution was about standardized action. This compassion revolution, evolution, feels like it's not standardized. It's the difference thing that drives it, not the standardization of it. And it's almost like, wow, that's a big shift for us to make, but it feels like the calling.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it, a generation is coming, if not already here, I would argue, that is expecting these things. And they're making choices with their feet on these things. But then I suppose it's and I know it's a cliche, but it's the unlearning of things, things that didn't serve us, that we decided when we look at children till today, and it's not much different to when we looked at children in the advent of tertiary education. Working memory and literacy skills and fine motor skills is how we're going to assess your self-worth. Now, hopefully you won't be too wounded if you meet teachers that aren't going to be excited about you. But essentially, those three things are the same thing we do now. Now, the future of the world is going to be dependent on working memory. Well, it's helpful, but technology is here. Literacy skills, well, yes, but you can talk into a computer. The idea of your original thought is what we're desperate for. And we need you to come in abundance with that.
And that feels like that's a kind of renaissance back to our pre-industrialized and even pre-farming, as you said. I mean, as you were talking to me about that, I'm thinking I'm reading Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens again.
Sapiens,
you know what I mean? So there's lots in that. But it strikes me that people are putting markers down for certain things to give us a sense of how to create at least a definition we can explore and then start to unpack and individualize. The concept of the economy going from a industrial machine making economy into a knowledge economy, but into perhaps the evolution quickly into creative economy.
Oh yeah.
You feeling that?
I am deeply hopeful for that.
Right.
It excites me so much. And again, not just about what I've said about the disability employment gap, but about participation.
Yeah.
And I think restorative justice, in these conversations.
Yeah.
Where I am nervous is looking for assurances that that's where we go.
Yeah.
That we don't see cynicism drive its agenda through the day, or that people just capitalize on things that they can because it can be exploited. Yesterday it was rejected. Today it can be exploited. We're still rejecting it if we're exploiting it, rather than saying we're welcoming it. I can't remember, I've lost count how many places I do. A lot of I get invited to a lot of conferences and things, and it's lovely, but I think I've lost count how many times when I've heard HR leaders or CEOs say we're on a journey. And I think when you are facing powerlessness, and you're looking at organizations with giant resources and hearing we're on a journey is kind of quite demotivating.
I know exactly what you mean.
So I'm much more interested in folks going, look, this is the stuff we are working through. This is stuff we haven't got right, and we really lost a lot. We just we lost a lot of good things here. We're still trying to figure out what we're going to do about that. But again, this touches on restorative justice.
It's a lovely phrase, and I'm totally with you on that, almost to the point that that's become such a cliche. I was just drawn to the fact that what I'd probably like people to say is, we've still got a backlog. And I know it's backward looking maybe and retrograde, but it's almost like it talks to the whole cycle of things. It's like we have a lot of work to do here, and it isn't always just about the sunny uplands type thing. It's kind of getting a bit like, that's tedious and tiring. Tell me what we've got to do, because I feel the labour of that, but I want to do it. Do you find when you're advising and even speaking or whatever, that people are really captured by the philosophy of this, and in a way that I am now, I'm hoping, and that listeners are too, but they're like, what can I do then? Do you know what I mean? Do they say, help us, what can we do? Yeah,
I think so. And I think that there's a mixture of that happening. I truly do. I think there is there's a deep intent for a lot of folks to say, help us, we would like to work with you to get this right. There are others who I think are perhaps looking at it curiosity, and perhaps with defensive postures. Like, how much have we got to be seen to do? I know what you mean. And how much should we do? And do we really have to do it?
Sure.
And there's then obviously an element of we're going to do it by kicking and screaming, And I suspect that the third, the kicking and screaming group, you can't do much with. But you can do with the first two. You can actually have a persuasive conversation where, okay, money's going to win here, right? But if one of our really great clients is Transport for London, right? And traditionally they would have asked us to do a lot of work on how to deal with wheelchair ramps, etc., etc. But the idea of sensory differences and how many people with sensory differences are using the underground, and then to make the changes that can make it so easy or easier for someone with sense who will be confused, flustered, maybe even depressed over lack of thinking, is a win. It's a win for, it's a duty of care, and it's the right thing to do. But it's actually saying, we didn't realise how important that was. But look how much we're getting in terms of happier customers. Look what we're getting. So those kind of things are changing. What we're doing with the Access Passport isn't a tool or even technology. Yes, it is. But it's actually a behaviour change. A behaviour change that says, well, I'm coming to see Perry. Like that. He's got my passport. The passport he's got is only for what lunch needs I have, But the other passport he has is one that says, look, I love to have notes in advance. Perry's done that. He's given them to me.
Yeah.
He's given me questions about,
Yeah.
and those sort of things. The good thing about passports, and I think especially when they're not PDF and Word documents, is they're about everybody.
Yeah.
They're not about disabled people.
Yeah.
They're about, I'm a single mum.
Yeah.
I raise a family. I work at a company. I love this company. I hope this company loves me back.
Yeah.
But at 5 o'clock, I got to leave.
Yeah.
I've got caring needs.
Yeah.
Now, it's not a disability.
No.
But it is a disabling situation if you're under-supported, you know?
Nice phrase again.
And I suppose, and then you can touch on this. Look, being black isn't a disability. But if your organisation doesn't foster leadership people who are black, that doesn't just say something.
Yeah.
It also says something about what can you expect to be here. Being gay isn't a disability. But if you're afraid to discuss your weekend... because you're working with some homophobic a-holes, frankly, it is a disabling situation because you are masking something that is deeply a most loving part of your life. And so we have to change things to a space where we say, what is a disabling situation rather than who's got what disability? Because otherwise we're going to find ourselves the next 20 years go, oh, they didn't tell me.
Yeah. And that phrase again is a real gift, I think, out of this. So thank you, Atif, for that. But disabling situation just seems to create a real sense that it's not about what that person is, it's about what's going on around them that creates that.
Oh, yeah. And it speaks, a DNA we talk about in this context of power and language a lot, so disabling situation. But really, it honours the social model. Yeah. The social model that says it's not about what's happening, what is me, it's about our civil society and how we deal with it.
And I guess there are all sorts of things that perhaps people are listening to this going, hang on a minute, I'm going to sense check everything from my accessibility technology to the way I position my employer brand to who sits on an interview panel to do we even do interviews anymore or do we do some other form of thing? So I'm sure there are lots and lots of practices that you and the team have experimented with and have almost now got a bit of a playbook and all those kind of things. Are you finding that things are becoming almost like threads that you can then weave into a solution tapestry or something?
Yes and no.
Right.
I think that there is a like I said, a maturity review to think about the ideology for each organisation and the intent for that organisation to be a leader. Not just doing it because LinkedIn looks like it should do, but because their behaviour changes, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
You know? Could be, George Floyd is probably the example of that. We're going to do it.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of organisations coming to us going, this is brilliant. This is so much more than we expected, in terms of we work with UKRI and we're changing the way that they look at funding.
Right.
Because historically, of course, you want to write a good funding application. Of course you do. You want to do that. But if you're coming from a culture or rather a lack of social capital that says you don't actually know what they look like. No one trained you. But you're addressing a social need at such a grassroots level. Well, that's a shame because then that funding doesn't meet the places where it's got to go.
Love that.
And so if they change the way they looked at, and they're brilliant, then we change things. And I suppose for people to realise there's no shortage of say, disabled-led startups.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of black-led startups.
Yep.
There is a deep shortage of staying power for them to make it through the 3 years.
Yeah.
Because that's about social capital. That's about who do you know. Yeah. It's about what you can get. Yeah. It's about understanding what funding is available to you that you never would have heard of. Yeah. So that's when the organisations got to anticipate their welcome.
Right.
And say, we need this money to work. We need to social change. We need our theory of change to work. Yeah. Well, we can only do that by changing the way people come to us. We go to them. Yeah.
I had all sorts of metaphors in my mind about kind of hacking into the system and changing the nature of the machinery. And there is some of that, of course. But I think what I've heard a lot of from you is about how we think about things ourselves when we are facing those challenges and the traumas and how we recognise our talents so that in us, we kind of get who we are and what we're here to play into. Yeah. But in order for that to be fully exercised, there's that response, that welcome, that openness and that justice-based approach to everything that I'm hoping people are kind of going, I'm going to go high on this and then see how, if we start from a vantage point of are we a just place to be in and have organizational justice, how that then changes the dynamic through. So I guess my kind of closing thing before I ask for your additional contributions is, are you an optimist about how things are going? And what would you like to see happen like really quickly so that we can really see the momentum?
Great. Oh, that's a brilliant question as well. I love your questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I am an optimist, I have to say. I think I feel a weird job to do my job if we weren't an optimist.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Nice.
You know, I suppose when I think about Zaytoun's work in Palestine, we were surrounded by people who said it can't be done. And you know the story, well. And so in a place where there's so much despair, and even the UN is just not sure how this could work. We did it as a team, the Zaytoun team, the founders, myself, one of them. And so I guess you have to be an optimist to do that. Yeah. But I suppose in terms of DNA, it's the same feeling. So yes, I am excited about. I'm excited about the power of lived experiences.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm excited about a conversation that moves these experiences to understanding it's not just a label that has been perhaps imposed upon someone, or even the label that person has felt incredibly liberated through. Yeah. Which I would say, in my case, both those things are true. Yeah. But it's about the social reality that makes this story hard to tell. Yeah. And so I think people are massively changing towards the curiosity of that. Where I guess have some pessimism. Yeah. And I think that's probably healthy as well, Honestly, I don't want to, because otherwise we're just selling, I don't know, sunshine and clouds. Yeah. I think what I've got is, if I think about some of the things that have happened, particularly in the shifts in the last few years, we've had a lot of people desperately needing to reinforce silos. Right. Which are the problem. I can illustrate a little bit, but I get silos, I get categorization. But you're also seeing people almost like, if it's not in that silo, then it's not real. Yeah. So neurodiversity perhaps is a good one. If you don't have a diagnosis, then it's not real. Exactly, anti-racism, well, it's about black people. No, really it's not. It's about a civil society you live in, a culture you raise your families and children in. But inherently, if your response to Black Lives Matters is to say all lives matters, well, inherently that's true as well. Yeah. But if that's your response, if that's your defensive posture, then you're not paying attention and you're really not caring. Yeah. What you're trying to do is trying to foster something that is just not helpful. So I suppose, do I think that's the majority? No. Yeah. I think a reality check is, if I use George Floyd, is that I would be really impressed by organizations that said in 2019, we cared and we did this and this. We're a big organization, but we did this. If you tell me in 2020, well, I'm still impressed because nothing compels you, but you're doing it. So that's a good thing. But sadly, and I suppose, I'll try and finish on an upbeat thing, but this is a reality check as well, that for so many people were shocked around the world when we think about the murder of and the torture of someone over 9 minutes. But in truth, I think a lot of black people were hurt. And I think a lot of white people were shocked. And part of the hurt is that white people are shocked because this is not the first. Yeah. It just got filmed. Yeah. And there were others after. So I guess the pessimism in me says, so please make that important. Yeah. Please make that something that you say as an organization matters to you, not because of 2020, but because of so many things. Yeah. And this applies to so many moral outcries. It could be Me Too. It could be the gender pay gap. So when I see organizations saying, we really haven't got it, by Jove, we haven't got it right. We haven't. We've got histories to transatlantic slaves. And such. We don't do this well, but we're made of good people who wish we did. And we're going to get there because we can't just shut ourselves down and say, we're nothing here or we're meaningless. I think there are a lot of good folks who just, like I said, have inherited a way of doing things and until recently never had an opportunity to even talk about it.
And I think that loops back beautifully to, so therefore they create an anticipatory welcome to all that happening and get excited about the possibilities and the differences. And I know that you're putting some effort and energy into a podcast yourself, and Labels is going to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's good. So it's about embracing intersectionality, which, which we talk about. But I think intersectionality sometimes can feel like a buzzword, or it's been peppered into conversation. So it kind of almost. So I struggle with. I ask what's
disruption,
the intent.
intersectionality. Yeah.
So I kind of, but really, I'm saying the podcast is brilliant. It's been run by DNA's team, and it will be a panel. And I hope you're one of my guests. Absolutely.
I'd love to.
But it's called Labels and Legacies.
Labels and Legacies.
Yeah,
right.
and how, as I said, how we embrace labels because they're liberating for us. But what's the legacy for those who don't want to? Where's their story?
I like that. And ultimately, as you said, it is stories. And I think what we've heard today is a whole collection of stories, both from your mind, your experiences, your work, and just your dreams and aspirations. So I'm loving that you've kept reality in there and beautiful amounts of positivity, that we know this is how we could create a destiny. And I think that's a lovely rallying call to bring that solidarity together. Anything else from you, Atif?
No, just to say thank you, Perry, for inviting me, for everyone listening.
Pleasure.
And I hope, everyone listening, we dig a little bit deeper than we get to, because it's not just our job titles, is it? It's the love we have for our children as parents, the love we have for children, and the world that we want, for each other. And also, if not, crikey, the world we wish we had when we were kids.
Exactly that. And we'll leave it at that. So, Atif Choudhury, thanks very much.
Thank you, Perry.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Tomorrow's People, please subscribe and check out our previous episodes from wherever you get your podcasts from. And if you want to transform your people processes, head to personio.com.